want to know which planet was causing your suffering? How about Earth?
Hey everyone, Brandflakes here, back with a new Chaos Zero Nightmare video. For today's video, we'll be starting my kind of low effort tier list videos, mainly for content, but hopefully also as educational. This tier list will be about the peak of each character's perceived power level to me, so very subjective stuff. And then there'll also be an accompanying tier list video at the very end about what, or like how difficult it is to actually hit that peak. So obviously I'll talk about the particular builds that I think are good for the characters, and then as well as like the divine requirements for them. But the second tier list will just be like, how hard is it to actually hit that supposed peak, in my opinion, again. So getting straight into the video, we'll just go chronologically through the release just because that's how this tier list is organized, and then I'll sort everyone how it is properly. Basically, when you see me like dragging the characters along inside the tier list, it's like the first chunk are usually unsorted, but everyone that's in like the back 2 or 3, basically the more to the right they are, especially if like the last or second to last or like third to last character, I'll say it out loud when I get there as well. Those are characters I'm less sure about because I haven't had the time to like invest in them, actually play with them. I actually have gotten a lot of time in a lot of characters, so most of these characters I am pretty certain about, and I've seen a lot of gameplay from another set of characters, but for the most part, you'll know that I'm confident in the character when I start talking about them a lot. And yeah. So getting actually into the tier list itself, first of all, we have Chizuru. I'm putting Chizuru in the A tier for power level just because while she isn't, A tier is essentially like they are pretty good. They can clear content if they're at their Giga power level, like super high bis. And Chizuru is also with the benefit that you don't need to have insane bis in order to kill everything except for like high ranking in Great Rift. Playing Chizuru, she has 2 main builds that are pretty popular these days. The first build that I know that Starmie talks about a lot is going to be the one where you go for Tsukuyomi on the add attacks to Shadow of the Moon and Shadow of the Moon Plus. And then with that, you just stack up a little bit of bind. I think Starmie prefers the like the multiple hits. I know this, I'm using a site for this, so it's a little bugged. But this second option here, there's supposed to be 50 times 4 hits. So it's not actually 50% damage and only 50% damage. It's actually 50 times 4. So it's a little more damage than what it says. And then obviously comes with the plus 40% damage amount. The third option here is, or the third epiphany is technically the second epiphany option, but it's third option on the screen. This card is also alright, but I think the reason why Starmie prefers this middle one is specifically because it also adds hits, and the idea that you're going for with this version of like one turn pump up Shadow of the Moon Plus and slam it immediately on that turn is that you're buffing your Chizuru with Ray, and obviously Ray has a lot of additive multipliers, so you want more hits, and obviously the 4-hit Oni Hunt that still gives you plus bind will give you more hits than the right side would otherwise. So that's pretty. Oh, okay, well, before we get too far into it, with that build, you are going to be deleting Bound at Dusk because you need the AP in order to pull your deck and pull out the Tsukuyomis and Oni Hunts. And realistically, like, you can keep the Moon Slash, you don't need the shield, but you can keep Moon Slash just to build up the Shadow of the Moon Plus with Tsukuyomi, because obviously, when you're running the plus hit on Shadow of the Moon, you don't have access to the Will-O-Wisp generation of Tsukuyomi, so you're relying almost entirely on Karmic Flames debuff, which requires you to have some support, whether that's through Forbidden cards. Starmie has recommended Ecstasy of Violence, which, if you don't know, I'll just pull up right here. Ecstasy of Violence is going to be the Forbidden card that adds a lot of hits, plus times 4, and then I recommended Portrait of Fury as well at some point, and while she hasn't actually tested it and like confirmed it, the napkin math that she did in her Discord seems to confirm that Portrait of Fury is also an acceptable side grade while still giving you a lot of draw, so it's pretty okay for that purpose alone. But yeah, that's gonna be the first build, and then the second build that exists for Chizuru is going to be the one that has a lot of auto attack focuses. There is a video for Chizuru that showcases this, but essentially instead of going for Shadow of the Moon spam, you're gonna be focusing more on this Oni Hunt that creates Moon Slashes. So this 5th card on the screen here. And then very same concept with Ray, you're pumping Ray damage modifiers, and so instead of just getting like 1 10 hit, 9 hit, 8 hit, however many Tsukuyomi cards you get on the Shadow Moon Plus version, instead of getting like a hit version of that, you're generating like 8 Moon Slashes instead, and obviously Moon Slash comes with 2 hit, and so you're getting a lot more smaller hits overall, but obviously with Ray, you're buffing the damage output. And then with that, Tsukuyomi ends up being pretty like whatever. Like you don't need Tsukiyomi to be like a Gigabist or like even that necessarily powerful because you're focusing on the Oni hunts, and therefore Tsukiyomi can just be like almost anything on that you can pick up because in the end like the Shadow of the Moon Plus is kind of your ender for this combo, but you're getting all of your value from the auto attacks that you're spamming out. I think ideally the video that I saw wasn't really that precise with it, but I feel like the third Tsukiyomi, the one that adds +1 hit to the next card used, is alright, and the final Tsukiyomi is a bit expensive, so maybe you don't actually want to play it, but it could help out with getting you like a bind 5 at the end of your spam in order to get a bit more damage on that final Shadow of the Moon Plus cast. And that build as well, you can run Bound at Dusk, but since it's especially like it's focusing on Shadow of the Moon Plus even less, and Bound at Dusk inhibit obviously only buff Shadow of the Moon, so it's another build that doesn't really want to keep Bound at Dusk, and therefore Bound at Dusk for both of these builds I've seen that have performed very, very well, at least on first turn or short form content, they don't want Bound at Dusk. So you can keep it, like it's totally fine to keep it, but the opportunity cost for keeping Bound at Dusk is going to be usually Moon Slash, which may be arbitrarily more efficient if you're trying to go for Shadow of the Moon Plus or you have the mana left over for that Moon Slash cast. So that's why Chizuru is going to be up here. Now, Yuki is going to be in A tier as well. Now, Yuki is weird to put in A tier. I'm only putting in A tier because it seems like, at least for the current patch cycles, by the time this video gets released, it might be outdated. I'm pretty sure I'm posting it before Season 1 ends. Or, yeah, I will be posting before Season 1 ends. And I don't know if the second part of Great Rift will still favor Yuki as much as the first half of Great Rift will. So keep this with a grain of salt, knowing that right now, at this exact moment, Smilegate has very, very high incentive to keep Yuki meta. And the reason why she is good is because a lot of the current things that have existed for like the game. So like last week's Basin or the last Basin run and this current Great Rift first half, they all really favor Yuki because they're giving Yuki a lot of buffs. So whether that's buffing inspiration cards, which is what Basin did, or just outright buffing AoE cards and order cards or whatever Yuki's attribute is, which is what the first half of Basin is doing. So if once they release like new AoE characters, Yuki's efficiency will unfortunately fall further and further because the odds that her specific niche gets buffed becomes way, way less more likely, if that makes sense. So that's why Yuki is an A with an asterisk, because she is good right now, but her viability is genuinely dependent on how long Smilegate will keep AoE or order buffed in future content. So what is Yuki? Oh, this is the spoiler. Spoiler, by the way, for the next tier list. I'll talk about the very end. Yuki, in my opinion, her best build and basically her only really, really good build is going to be one where you actually stick on the original Epiphany. So if you don't know, this site actually keeps the first like base card as a first slot because this is supposed to like kind of represent like the existence of generic epiphanies attaching themselves to the base card. So like stuff like plus morale, plus resolve, +1 draw, depending on like the mana cost, obviously. Like with morale, resolve, those with the buff based things, like the ones that give you temporary buffs, these do scale to a certain point with AP. So for example, if you have a 0 cost card, you'll only ever get +1 morale from the generic epiphany on the morale. If you get a 1 mana card that gets the plus morale, you get 2 morale. So obviously Flash Slash being 2 mana gives you 3. And I think unfortunately it doesn't go above 3. So if you have a 3 AP card like on Khalipe and stuff, it still stays at 3, so the value drops off. And also, as another tangent, Divine Epiphanies do not care about your card's mana cost. They will just give you the baseline of Divine Epiphanies. So if you ever seen it, like you can get like +1 morale on cards, on the upgrade cards and exhaust cards that cost more than 0 mana, which is why Divine Epiphanies, rather the best Divine Epiphany for Yuki ends up being like subtraction of mana or no, really just subtraction of mana, especially with the inspiration effect. So with all that digression aside or tangential ranting aside, the best Epiphany for me is going to be the morale buff for the base Flash Slash, because as I mentioned, you're getting 3 morale for a 2 mana card, but because the inspiration effect, it actually reduces it down to 1 mana. So you're essentially cheating out that last morale buff, and that means that Yuki's Flash Slash base Epiphany becomes a very good, or it becomes like an AoE version of Rei's Predator Blade. And obviously Predator Blade is 1 more morale, but Yuki does a lot more damage, especially in AoE, and she can more freely dupe it. And obviously there's the existence of Divine Epiphanies. I mentioned the -1 Divine Epiphany, obviously, and that can make Flash Slash into a 0 mana cost, +3 morale AoE card, which would obviously be very, very good. But again, as I mentioned earlier, as another earlier, Yuki is really dependent on how long they keep buffing her attribute, which I think was order. Yeah, we can see order here. Also, what did this pop up? I can see Adina. All of these are very, very old search bar things, but whatever. Yeah, she has order. So again, as long as they keep order buffed and AoE buffed, then yeah, that'll basically be how long she's viable for. And the other quote unquote viable Yuki builds are all just gonna lean into the AoE aspect of her builds. You can dupe Iceberg's Cleave for a bit, just because obviously Iceberg Cleave is the most, like, it is one of the highest damage, highest efficiency AoE cards in the game. If you don't have E2 Yuki, it is nerfed, but even with that nerf, it is still a 1 mana, like 350% kind of, maybe, I think it's like 320% AoE Cleave, which is a lot of damage for a 1 mana card. Obviously, it can't be Epiphanied, which makes its efficiency a bit lower, because once again, like with a Divine duped Flash Slash, it could be a 0 cost, 180% damage with +3 morale, which could be a lot better. The other versions, like if you get the one right here, like let's say you don't hit the morale, but you get this buff version, it's a 0 mana, 270% damage, which is still a bit worse than Iceberg Cleave, but it is potentially 0 mana because of Divine Epiphanies. Like, duping Iceberg Cleave is still alright, but it's not that great. And the other final option for Yuki is duping things like Prepare to Subdue like once or twice, just so that she can be fully self-sufficient with drawing. And honestly, the only really, really bad Prepare to Subdue is going to be the one that decreases your damage, because even if Yuki is more of a supportive role, she still does a lot of damage overall with her AoE card, so you don't want this one, which is, funnily enough, the main Prepare to Subdue that Smilegate recommended for her trial builds, but you really don't want this. Everything else is very okay. And then once again, ironically enough, to me, the best Prepare to Subdue Epiphany is going to be the +1 morale version on the base version, because this obviously applies to the team and it applies to all of your cards. You can see that there's the third version, which buffs up the attack cards of the unit, which is theoretically a lot more damage amplification overall for Yuki, because all of her attack cards are above 100% base. But again, if we're playing Yuki with plus morale support, she does end up buffing other characters a lot with this inflated morale. So, sorry, there's a lot of noise outside. I'm pretty sure my mic picks it all up. But basically, like, for me, the ideal Yuki build, like the Gigabis, would be like 3 copies. So you do Flash Slash twice with the Divine Epiphany, so it's going to be 2 0 costs, or 3 0 cost Flash Slashes with +3 morale, so that essentially becomes 9 potential morale from Flash Slash alone. And then the Prepared Subdues would be all base Epiphanies to save up on save data, and then you just get 2 base Epiphanies with +1 morale. So overall, Yuki, in my personal super bis, would be able to give you, she would be able to cycle almost an entire deck herself, because ideally you get Trickery Blade with the draw 1 inspiration card, and then you delete these 3 base cards. And obviously you play Freezing Blade. So you'd be able to draw all 3 Flash Slashes and your Iceberg Cleave with 2 Prepared Subdues and 1 Trickery Strike. So she'd be a basically fully self-sufficient character who does come with some cost, because playing Trickery Strike does cost 1 mana. But if you get the ideal draw and all that, she would give you the potential of +11 morale for 1 mana, if you draw all of her cards before needing to play Trickery Strike. So that's the ideal. Obviously, again, her AoE efficiency is really dependent on how much she's buffed or nerfed, but it's mainly the fact that she is going to be a very good AoE. Like, she probably won't be clearing like super tanky things once her buffs fall off, but she will be able to clear small things regardless. And then your single target character, who will probably have multi-hit, will have +11 morale to end as a finisher, which is very efficient. Now, going to the next character, I'm going to put Haru in B tier, and the reason why I'm putting Haru in B tier is just because I've managed to build her up a little bit. I don't have the super insane good version of her, unfortunately, but I did get a build where I got 3 retrieve the anchor pointer epiphanies, and then I managed to get 1 like decent anchor shot. Very specifically, the anchor shot I got was the one where when it crits, it bounces back to your hand, which is obviously a bit lower damage than having the combo or even the actual scaling one. And when I hit Family Head 4 out of 9, which is the version that makes it tanky and gives him damage reduction, I can only deal like 8.3 thousand damage, which I think the ideal version, like the super bis version of Haru, can maybe double that, which is still 16k, and obviously that isn't killing Family Head 4-9, because Family Head 4-9 still has like 30,000 HP. And even with weakness advantage, that would probably end up only being like 20k damage overall. So the super bis version of Haru, maybe, I mean, to be fair, like I probably don't have the right supports for her because I'm just running a test run. With like perfect supports with everything else, maybe she can also be an A tier. So this is kind of like a bad showing for her. But the main issue is that I don't see people playing her. Not many people lab her. Like there's very, very few, if any, real YouTube or even like Twitter or Bilibili short and highlights that show Haru in like an insanely powerful light on the level of even just Chizuru. So once I'm back from the holidays, once I have more time like season 2 to grind out Haru more and like try and tune out this like super bis concept, maybe I can actually hit something that is impressive and she'd move up in those future tier lists. But for now, she's not that great. And so again, you can disagree with me. Like the reason why I'm gonna over explain all these builds is so that you guys can like point out what you like or don't like. But basically with Haru, the main thing is that I think you're gonna be taking the combo anchor shot, or the upgraded base anchor shot, the one with plus 90% damage amount. Excuse me, the one with plus 90% damage amount. This one is going to be, I think this one is technically all right if you get the full value of Haru. So like you get the retrieve anchor pointer, the one on the bottom left here that like bounces itself back and then lets you move anchor shot. If you get all 4 dupes of this, then the middle, like this version of anchor shot will scale up decently and be competitive with this combo version of anchor shot. The reason why I think this +1 hit is way more impactful though is because you'll very often have a lot of cycle and therefore you'll have a lot of other buff cards played. And then every time you get at least 1 or 2 morale, this means that the difference between this anchor shot and this anchor shot is a lot smaller. And because you're double dipping in morale with the +1 hit, that means that again, like you're losing less damage for having this combo, and you're also getting the full effectiveness immediately. Whereas with this one, you have to cast this like I think like 3 times before it even equalizes the damage with this anchor shot before morale is even in the question. And obviously the 4th and 5th cast of this anchor shot will outscale this anchor shot. But when you're casting anchor shot like maybe 9 times total through the retrieve anchor pointer, obviously like you still have to catch up to the damage that you lost or you missed out on. And again, with morale, it's very likely that this anchor shot just pulls ahead because there's a lot of equipment that exists where you can like add a lot of flat modifiers to a character. So I'll just go ahead and tab into the equips here. So like legend weapons, you can see that we have things like it's a bit hard to cast this obviously, but we have things like dopamine injector, which actually would help out, which okay, no, so dopamine injector, like with these buffs, it only affects the base damage of the card. So this version of dopamine injector actually makes it so that the double hit is more effective because the double hit is double dipping into the damage amount buff, whereas the scaling one is only getting the singular 40% buff, right? We have stuff like dimensional cube. If you run Haru with like Cassius and Nia in order to pull out all the anchor pointers in advance, that comp involves a lot of discarding. So you can discard like literally like 15 times, and then dimensional cube is plus 150% with that alone. And if you're running things with Cassius, if you have morale buffs on other characters, obviously you get a lot more morale effects as well, which is the reason why I think the +1 hit is more impactful overall. But like to be fair, like if you're just going for a funny Haru build, you just want to make her feel satisfying to play, you really can't go wrong with any of these 5 epiphany effects. The only one that's truly bad is this bottom left one that discards all of your other cards just because it's more expensive. But even this one is okay because ideally by the time you're popping off with anchor shot, you don't need the other combatant cards. The only issue is that like the scaling on this one is like a one-time really massive hit, and then every other hit is like really mediocre because it's not going up and up like the rest of them are. And then anchor pointer, unfortunately, the only really powerful anchor pointer from like a YouTuber highlight perspective is the one that has retrieve, because this essentially gives you another dupe of anchor pointer due to the retrieve effect bouncing it back to your hand on first activation. Obviously, this means that every subsequent turn will be weaker and weaker. If you're trying to play Haru for like a longer time outside of the one turn combo, then I think these bottom 2 or the other bottom 2 anchor pointers will be more than fine. I honestly haven't been able to test this anchor pointer because I don't have enough time till I didn't like dupe it. I didn't really play around with it because I was trying to go for the YouTuber for this retrieve one. But this bottom one, where it increases the damage amount by 20%, if this one stacks on the same anchor shot over and over and over again, like if you have 4, if the final anchor pointer gives you plus 40% or plus 80% damage to that anchor pointer, this one is probably pretty good. And obviously crit is also very good. Obviously, like, once again, if the crit stacks as well, you can get like giga crit on the anchor pointer and have a guaranteed crit, which will also be very nice. But essentially, like, since these have persisting effects that last beyond the first turn, both of these would be better in the long run than this anchor pointer. But this anchor pointer does technically represent 2 anchor pointers for that one turn, which is why I like this one more. But obviously, not every form of content is a one-turn thing. There might be order, or was she justice? Yeah, she's justice. There might be justice single target based content that would want you to have Haru continuing to pump damage, and therefore these 2 anchor pointers would be more useful than this bottom left one after many turns of cycling and all that. Next character, Mei Lin, very easy S tier. It's pretty easy to explain why Mei Lin's S tier in terms of Giga Power. We all know Rising Dragon Spire. Oh, I guess to explain to people who don't know, if you already know how Mei Lin works, then I'd appreciate you listening anyways. But for the view time, but obviously it's not that you can just skip to the next person if you know what's up with this. Mei Lin is really powerful, obviously, because of this bottom right Rising Dragon Spire Epiphany, where for that turn, each passion card you cast, so it's not included to just her. If you're playing Veronica, Selena, Lucas for some reason, Owen for some reason, Maribell for some reason, like all these passion characters, every card you play from their pool adds +1 hit to Rising Dragon Spire. And so obviously, as you can imagine, when you have a lot of draw cards, zero cost cards, like some deck bloat from like confiscations or other things, this can stack up very quickly. And Mei Lin herself has basics and unity of attack and defense, which allows you to pull back the basics and play them again, which obviously represents 3 cards played for 1 card. With all that stacking, you can see how Rising Dragon Spire stacks up very high, very quickly. And with all that, it's very easy to see Mei Lin dealing like tens of, like 50,000 damage in 1 turn with like very low effort. And it's to the point where, because of Mei Lin, Smilegate has had to add buffs to the bosses that make it so that they can't take damage beyond a certain amount of hits from 1 card. And Mei Lin is the perpetrator of that. And she is in S tier just because she is game warping in that regard. Obviously, with the addition of these affixes or these like buffs to bosses and mobs that make her worse, she could technically drop down a tier, but it's more of just like the raw power she has makes her obviously S tier, because she forces the game to warp around her, and that's not very interesting for Mei Lin. But she doesn't have very many other interesting builds going on, sadly, besides like auto attack spam. But even her auto attack spam build is probably just quite good, because you can just stack up basic attacks. You can play Ray to get basic attacks more powerful, and in the end she would be fairly similar to Chizuru in that regard, but she could technically be slightly worse because Chizuru has double the hits from all of those basic attacks, because obviously she has double hit naturally on her basics. But in the end, like, the raw output is still probably pretty similar, because Mei Lin has stuff like Spirit of the Armada, which gives her more damage the more she plays cards, and as well as Flame Dragon Jewel, which gives her base cards more damage anyways. So the efficiency even for her base attack spam build is going to be quite good compared to even someone like Chizuru. Rin is a character that I haven't really played often, but I'm going to put her in the bottom of A tier, mainly because there has been evidence that Rin has some pretty good builds. It's going to be the exact same vibe as someone like Mei Lin and Chizuru, where you're spamming cards that you're generating, not necessarily generating, but moving into your hand over and over again. So like, obviously, Chizuru generates basic attack cards, which punch really hard, and then Mei Lin moves her basics back to hand after they're played. Rin is on the Mei Lin side, where she is able to move cards back to her hand through the use of Dark Mist Secret Arts. So see this middle bottom epiphany here. After you play the card, because this moves from graveyard and not discard pile, you can get back cards you've played. And so it's going to be Secret Mist, Dark Mist Secret Art, Annihilation, and Black Dance. Those are going to be this one right here and this one right here. You can bounce these back to your hand quite easily with this, and then if you have 4 of these, you can cast these 5 times total, assuming you draw them initially as well. So obviously, with all those hits, Dark Mist Secret Art Annihilation has either like infinite hit count on this top right version, or just a massive amount of damage on almost every other version. And then the main thing with Dark Mist Secret Art Black Dance is that, like, it's probably, I think it's not actually that hard to get skill cards, because your supports probably have a lot of skill cards when you play Rin. But I guess in the end, it's kind of like it's just bonus damage on top of it. So like, she will still benefit very heavily from morale, from Ray, from just like flat additive damage that exists. And obviously that stacks up very easily. And yeah, I think that's the only real Rin build that people can play, because there's no real point in duping many of these other cards. You're almost always duping the move card for Dark Mist Secret Art in order to do a lot of slashes with that. So a bit more like linear or like a bit more generic of a build path, but it's still very efficient. So Rin does belong in A tier for that. Now Khalipe is a character I'm going to put in B tier. She might belong in C tier. Like all of the tanks honestly might belong in C tier just because it's very hard to get builds that make them pop off outside of like short form content or pop off outside of like I guess like any content that exists, because the thing is right now in Basin does have a turn limit, and I think Khalipe teams can clear within the turn limit requirement, but it's more difficult than expected because Khalipe doesn't have like insane damage pumps like all these other characters do. But Haru does have really good damage, and since Khalipe, at least from what I've seen, doesn't have that efficiency, she probably goes in C tier. My initial template has her in B tier, but maybe she belongs down here instead. It's kind of hard to say. But basically, the reason why Khalipe isn't that impressive, even when you have Gigabis, is because most of her power is giving you an easier run in Chaos. But once you take her out of Chaos, like her Vulture Ejection, the damage is quite low. Obviously, you'll have 3 copies or up to 4 copies of Vulture Ejection, but the issue is that she doesn't get really great scaling. Like, these are all single hit cards, so they aren't getting double dipping value for morale, and Khalipe herself doesn't have any buffing effects where you're getting super value from Vulture Ejection. Obviously, Silver Veil does exist, but Silver Veil is just another one-hit activation. It does do a lot, but for the most part, like, Khalipe is going to be very similar to Yuki, I guess, where you're kind of pumping out a lot of AoE damage, but she's a little different because her personal like cycling ability is a bit weaker. So obviously she has Rally, but if you compare this to Yuki's Prepare Subdue, Rally is going to be 1 cost almost generically overall. There's a 2 cost version, which I think is probably the worst version. And because it's 1 cost, that means that you might have to hit Divine on it, which makes her much harder to build. And getting the value of the Divine isn't even that good because for Yuki's side, she can get Divine on getting +1 AP, which makes her a lot more flexible. Whereas with Rally, you have to go -1 AP, which means that you're just going even and getting like catching up to what Yuki has baseline, if that makes sense. And on top of all that, like Yuki's base Epiphany could also just give her +1 draw, which again can be matched with Rally, but having an extra AP to play with versus saving 1 AP from like needing to save 1 AP from a Divine Epiphany are 2 different beasts. And just because again, like you could go for the morale tech as well on Khalipe, right? Like this could be a because with Celestial it will autocast with a 2 mana card, and so Vulture Ejection could be 3 morale as well. So you could get 12 morale instantly with Vulture Ejection if you somehow manage to draw everything. But you still have to play a 2 mana card with Khalipe, and then because of that alone, she is a lot more expensive to set up than Yuki, and just naturally because of that, she is much lower, and she is also a lot more awkward to build because you have to hit like with Yuki, you can miss an Epiph or a dupe event and like go for Prepare Subdue instead of Flash Slash Perma. But with Khalipe, like you are kind of just focused on getting as many Vulture Ejections as possible because Rally is kind of expensive, and you could dupe Rally, like again, just like Yuki, you can maybe dupe Rally once or twice to get the Vulture Ejections guaranteed, but the rest of your kit is not helping you support, like the rest of your kit is not good. With Yuki, she has upgrades so it gets out of your hand, she has like other AoE cards to help you cleave, but like Greatsword Aquila doesn't really have any particularly powerful epiphanies. Overpower is kind of not that great of a card in my opinion, and Absolute Protection is something you don't really want to play outside of Chaos because it doesn't do much for you outside of Chaos. So just like kit to kit wise, Khalipe is sharing a niche as Yuki, or sharing a niche with Yuki, was notably weaker to me, which is why she ends up being in C tier. Magna with that as well. I haven't really seen anyone play her. She might have a better build and cook going on, but she also goes in C tier just because, once again, these tank characters don't have the best support, whether it's through game mechanics or epiphanies. They aren't really doing much for now. There might just be like a lack of innovation from the player base. Like there might actually be a good Magna build that exists, but it's gonna be really hard to find that because of how uninteresting she is to actually build around for most players, and that's why she goes in C tier. I don't own her, so I personally haven't cooked on her, so it's hard for me to even recommend a build. So that's why she's gonna be on like this far right version. I'm not putting in D tier because I don't believe that she's that trash, if that makes sense. But there is probably, like, if you've played her or you own her or you want to go for the propaganda that Magna is that terrible, she could go in D tier very easily. I'm just not doing that out of respect for the fact that I haven't been able to lab her myself. Veronica is going to go, ironically enough, in high A tier. mainly because Veronica's entire niche is that she is a very good draw engine. So she could go in S tier. Don't get me wrong, she is very powerful at what she does, and she is the Pot of Greed Giga Goddess, and this is only for outside of Chaos. If this is Chaos, she's like top of the line. But because outside of Chaos, she is more of just a draw engine, she goes in A tier because when you look at what the other characters are doing or what like I'll put the characters into S tier like the other supports to try and maintain my stance that Veronica goes in A tier instead. But Veronica, she does give a lot of draw, right? Like she is memed about Pot of Greed for a very very good reason, and she will be played very very often in anyone's like for like lower effort players like myself. She'll always be available and she'll always be like getting built on the side because she's so prevalent, whatever you want to call it, in chaos runs. And obviously, like, got her Pot of Greed, repose, draw 2, this can Divine Epiphany to draw 3, or you get plus 1 AP. You have Sir Kowalski, which is another draw 2. There's 2 versions. One has clutter through drawing a skill card, getting a ballista. The other one has no clutter. Divine Epiphany, this is another Pot of Greed with 0 cost draw 2, which is obviously quite insane. And then everything else she has is an upgrade. So after the first turn, you have a tiny deck, and that tiny deck just gives you permanent cycling, and that is very hard to deny. Is very good. The only problem with Veronica is that technically she does have some clutter, which can be really impactful if you don't have a perfectly optimized deck, and that makes some turns very awkward. And her buff, she has no real buffs. You can run a character like Rosaria on her. Rosaria is the 4-star ranger partner that has a chance to give you morale when you use an upgrade or skill card. So Veronica isn't totally wasted on this buff front, but the issue is that all the other really powerful supports will have much access to much more powerful and much more consistent buff sources. So Veronica, like, she is literally the top, if not the bottom of S tier in terms of like build power. It's just that all she is good for outside of Chaos is super drawing, which is totally good, don't get me wrong, but because of cards like Portrait of Fury, because we have other characters that can draw a ton, just being like a turbo draw engine isn't good enough to be at the top of the tier list, in my opinion. But again, since you're gonna be playing her a lot if you own her, especially if you're trying to like walk certain characters you're building into the finish line to get them real builds, she just will be naturally very frequent, and she will naturally be very strong because the odds that you have a good Veronica build are going to be extremely absurdly high, just because for most players she'll be in every run if you are just grinding decks non-stop. Hugo, Hugo I'm going to actually put in S tier, which might be surprising. The reason why I'm putting Hugo in S tier is because at least in Great Rift, obviously there's like Chains of Agate or Chains of Obsession Tressa, which kind of blows a lot of things out of the water. But the main reason why I have Hugo so high is mostly because of the fact that Hugo is competing with like those Tressa decks, like originally before Chains of Obsession got introduced, before Glorious Resistance got introduced. Hugo was still up there with supports like Cassius, which is actually insane considering how much damage Cassius does. So I don't really know. Like, he'll again be on the very right side when it comes down to like analysis, because I don't really know what Hugo does. Well, like, I don't own Hugo, so I can't really like tell you what his ideal builds are. But again, the fact that he is a third character that can somewhat contest the lower end of the super unfair 4-star comp just means that he has to be powerful. And the main reason why he's powerful with at least Mika Tressa is obviously because Hunting Instincts, if you have like maybe 1 or 2 copies of this, that means that every heal you do with Mika, you can pop off Hugo as well. I think with Hugo or Mika Tressa specifically, you do want 3 so that it matches the 1 heal into triple attack. That's probably what you're doing. But obviously Hugo also has very powerful draw. This is another scenario where like, it's technically weaker than Veronica because you do spend 1 mana to get the draw 2, but unlike Veronica, Hugo is adding a massive amount of single target support damage, and that's why it's fine for Quick Fix to be 1 draw. And then again, we have 2 upgrades, which makes his deck thinner. We have Dingo Howling, which is again a draw 2 card. So once again, just like Veronica, or unlike, like, I guess Veronica's Kowalski is also 1 mana, so you're essentially paying like 1 extra mana to get not quite the exact same draw power of her, but very similar draw power while getting a ton of damage. Like, we can see here that Like Fan of Daggers is not that great to be fair, but it's still like a decent chunk of cash, and you can always just not cast it when you're playing Hugo. But everything else just supports him, adding a ton of single target damage over and over and over again, and it's basically free because you pay it one time, one cost, and then you just play off Tressa, and then he just continues to pump out damage with her. So that's why he's at the top of S tier. Again, very right side, because I'm not sure how good he is without the Mika Tressa engine, and if Tressa gets nerfed, then Hugo probably falls a little bit on the ladder, but getting free follow-up attacks is something that you cannot discount when it comes to characters like this. Now, Renoa, this might be a hot take, but I think Renoa is also an A tier for character power level. I know Kwawi, who is someone that I recognize from the Shadowverse sphere, and I know he's very good at Shadowverse and he's very smart. So I know Kwawi specifically says that he thinks that Renoa is his second best DPS. As someone who's played Renoa, I don't quite see it, but to be fair, my journey with Renoa has been more of like the highlight reel and montages as opposed to like actually maximizing her fullest optimal potential. Because if you go to my YouTube channel, obviously my Renoa video is just me trying to get as many builds as I can, and because I don't play buffs so I can keep Family Head alive, she ends up just like doing like little tickles to Family Head. So like the 37 bullets, I think, or no, it was like 34 bullets I pelted at him, and they're doing a very small amount of damage because I had to keep the guy alive. But there are probably plenty of builds that make Renoa do way more damage comparatively to what I did. So Renoa has a lot of different ways to be played. I think the best version is probably Flower, just because this way you can avoid needing Divine Epiphanies. I haven't gotten lucky enough to play her with like Super Divine Epiphany efficiency builds, but like even just like Flower of I don't even know what the full name is. I just call it Flower. But so like Flower, you can quad dupe this to get 12 Dirge Bolts a turn. And then Echo of Sorrow obviously can create some Dirge Bolts as well, whether it's the upgrade version to guarantee you have some synergy, or if it's just any of these other ones to get more efficiency from your Dirge Bullets. And then the other very optimal Dirge Bullet thing that would give you a lot of power as well would be the increased damage amount by 100%, which obviously makes, like, doubles your Dirge Bullets base damage, which is very efficient. And then Instant Judgment just being like an upgrade card. There's an upgrade card to thin your deck out. Everything else does a good amount of damage. And Last Edge of Soul obviously just being like a play this, potentially discard 9 Dirge Bolts instantly to do not only a lot more damage with Last Edge of Soul itself, but also just pelting your opponent with it. And then obviously, once again, with Nia, if you don't know, Nia's Ego skill does discard your deck. So if you get a fresh shuffle, and then discard, or then use Nia's ultimate or Ego skill, you will shuffle all of your Dirge Bullets into the discard, and then they'll pop all the Dirge Bullets you have that exist. So she has very high damage potential. She's very fun to play. Her animations are great. The sound effects are very satisfying. It's just that, like, again, I haven't pushed her to the very peak, and I don't see that peak that Chloe mentioned, and that's why I have her at A tier, just because she falls more similarly into the Chizuru Rin build, where she can pump out a ton of damage with optimizations. She can do a ton of stuff, but unfortunately, she is not like solo carrying / so broken that she made Smilegate, like she's not making Smilegate have to nerf around her, right? And the 0 tier is probably very biased towards supports, to be honest, but or the S tier is gonna be very biased towards supports, but the DPS that end up in S tier will be characters that like either add an insane amount of damage, so like again Hugo, or they like for very cheaply, which is again Hugo, or they like force like the game to be bounced around them, which is like Mei Lin, some other characters we'll talk about. So again, she might be better, like she could be way better than I give her credit for, and it's just me having a skill issue and not having enough time spent into Renoa to make her be super powerful. But she is definitely very solidly in A tier when it comes to overall power level with a full build. Luke is kind of an S tier just because he gets knocked by the same thing that Mei Lin does. If you don't know, Luke is in a similar bucket where he has a card that lets him do giga damage. Dance of the Demon, you can see that there's one Epiphany that lets him stack off of extra attacks. So this Epiphany with Cassius, Cassius specifically, because Cassius obviously adds a lot of auto attacks. I forget who the third was, but basically the entire idea is that you dupe Rapid Fire, the Retrieve Rapid Fire, with the Divine Epiphany to make it 0 cost like all 4 times. And so if you have a well-built Luke, you will guarantee crit. So each Rapid Fire represents 5 attacks. And then since you have 4 copies of this, that becomes 20 attacks. And then 20 attacks, obviously adding to Dance of Demon. Those 20 attacks, or with not yeah. It's 20 attack cards. With those 20 attack cards, you will generate at least 6 triple zeros. Obviously, any extra zero cost would give you 7 triple zeros, and so that becomes 27 attacks at least for Dance of the Demon. And then if you have stuff like Dice Trick, you can add a few more. And then if you have some other character supports, you like whoever the third is, you can add a few more through that. You can even just add a few more through the stealth reload that obviously gives you more bullets. And so it's a lot more difficult to stack with Luke because you need a much more fine-tuned build, and the fact that you need to get Divine Epiphany on rapid fire does make it a bit more difficult to like actually get the build off and going. And but the end result is the same. You have a character that can deal like 60 hits in one turn at the very peak, which will delete anything that has below like 50,000 HP off the map, even through damage reduction. So that's why Luke ends up being the same tier. And again, very, very fragile tiering. Unlike Mei Lin, as far as I can tell, he has no other route that would still let him keep at least A tier. Like Dance of the Demon, I don't think the bullets themselves do much damage at all. Even if you pump morale with it. And when we look at it, like none of these, like all these effects would end up being hit by the hit cap count buff that they're giving monsters and bosses. So in the end, like Dance of the Demon, like he only has that one build, and that one build is very easily neutered by affix and stuff. But he does fit into the like Smilegate had to balance around this aspect of the build in order to keep the game quote unquote fair for the rest of the characters. Now Kayron, I want to put into A tier, but he might actually be in B tier. I don't really know much about Kayron. I don't watch Kayron content creators, and I have looked at his kit, and I honestly do not see the sauce in his kit. But I did see that he was able to clear side 1 of Great Rift, which is, to be fair, more of an AoE check than anything. So I figure that he does have very powerful upsides and like pop-off moments. The main issue is that like Kayron himself, he is not only the most manifest, like he's one of the most dupe hungry characters in the game, and on top of that, he needs Bria as his partner because Bria just allows him to discard his utilities from deck. And is it just deck? No, it's discard pile. So obviously, Kayron, I guess if you don't know, Kayron has a mechanic called Futility, and it doesn't show up here, but Futility is essentially a status ailment card, and the more you play these Futilities, the more benefits you get. And then Bria being able to exhaust all these Futilities for the cost of just playing an Ego skill makes it much more efficient, because even Kayron's Ego skill only exhausts Futility in hand if you have him at base, and you can see that there is one that says Graveyard, but as mentioned earlier, he is one of the most dupe dependent characters in the game, and you need 3 extra dupes in order to get the Graveyard target for Futility. So he is not only super expensive, he is like something that like, again, like I don't watch the content creator, so I actually don't know where he goes, and that's why it's hard for me to actually put him anywhere. If there's an I don't know tier, then Kayron would be up there, but purely because I saw him clear first side of Great Rift, I will say he's A tier because he not only lacks the order buff, I guess he had the void buff, so he actually is similar to Yuki, where they're both buffs because that Kayron probably had like an AoE spell. But if I have Yuki up here because she can clear Great Rift with buffs and stuff, then I think Kayron would be up there as well. Now, unfortunately, Orlea, as much as I love her design and love her kit, I think she unfortunately goes into B tier as well. As a support, she does have some pretty good supportive abilities, like she obviously has Softy Spam, which gives you a lot of extra vulnerability stacks, which is quite nice because vulnerability is a final damage modifier, which gives you plus 50% like after all the morale stacking and other buffs you have associated with the attack cards. And that is pretty undeniably good. The biggest issue is that Orlea does not come with the draw at all. And playing this growth acceleration on Softy is kind of really expensive because you can see it's 1 mana, and every mana you spend means that you have to have more Divine Epiphanies or more like it's like the more mana you have to spend on a base card, the more you need Divine Epiphanies. And because I haven't been able to play like 0 Divine Epiphany growth acceleration on Softy, and like if you have Divine Epiphany -1 on growth acceleration, that means you can't solve her other problem where she has no draw, right? So like there's a lot of things that work against Orlea. She is a character who I think her holes can be solved all right with the right decks, but it's just mainly the fact that she's so dependent on Divine Epiphanies, and I tried farming her for like 5 days straight, and I got nothing that was really powerful with the Divine Epiphanies. and her baseline is like very okay. Like obviously, if you watch my YouTube videos, you can see that I had a Swifty spam meme where I just like went Swifty and then I kept buffing with like three growth accelerations for like 11 turns, and I popped it and it did a lot of damage, which obviously was fun. Like that was very fun to do, especially with vulnerability. But that obviously is not really sustainable for real content. That's just like me memeing with Orlea and doing a huge stomp. Her other build with Sturdy, like shield spam with Sturdy to enable characters like Magna and Maribell with their shield damage cards is another instance where like you simply need the Divine Epiphany on Sacred Sensor in order to make it cheaper, because otherwise you're spending like 3 to 4 mana on Sacred Sensor, which is really expensive. But like without that, you can't play Sacred Sensor and draw in order to draw the other Sacred Sensors and support yourself in other means. So she's just a really expensive character, and her upsides with all that are not even game-breakingly powerful or even like notably strong. So that's why unfortunately she is in B tier. She is really fun though. The sound effects of the creations evolving is pretty undeniable, and I think with some help, like I don't think they'll ever buff this character like this, but like if they gave her some draw somewhere, she would very quickly accelerate to being a very strong support. But without all that, she's super expensive. She doesn't have her own cycle unless you get Forbidden, or unless you get Portrait of Fury, which is going away after season 1, as far as I'm aware, for like true content, if that makes sense. And all of her creations, like, well, they are very fun, they aren't like super powerful in terms of effects. So unfortunately, she goes where she is. Owen, I'm totally unsure, so I'm trying to slap her. I'm trying to call this the unsure tier, because Owen, I think he actually goes in C tier again. Like he's like not only DPS, but he also like still doesn't do damage and doesn't have very good support effects. I think again, like it might just be the lack of innovation on Owen, but I'm fairly certain he doesn't really belong anywhere higher than here C, because his buffs like Wind Charge. If you don't know, I haven't really been able to test this, but I've been told this many times by other people. But these add +1 hits to the next attack card. Like there's obviously one that's universal. So let's see, this top right one. Top right one is like it's universal to any character, but the issue is that it stacks by like charges, not actually on the effect. So even if you cast this 3 times, you're not getting +3 hits to that attack card. You're getting that attack card is getting +1 hit, -25% damage amount for the next 3 casts, if that makes sense. So even this buff is not that powerful. And this Wind Charge, where you activate the next use skill card one more time, it exhausts and it's unique, so you can't even dupe it if you want to, which really limits that cook. And realistically, like Owen is a very selfish character. All of his dupes want to buff him. Wind Riding wants you to buff him. Most of his good cards want you to buff him specifically, and so he doesn't even do. It looks like at least he doesn't even do that much damage. But maybe it comes down to the fact that no one's really experimenting, and maybe he has like a singular build that does barely okay damage, like enough to kill Great Rift within like, or not Great Rift, like Nebula bosses within like 10 turns. Like that is a possibility, but killing a Nebula boss in 10 turns on 9/9 is not very impressive. So unsure obviously, but probably bottom of C tier if we're being honest. Amir's another unsure, but I think she goes in the top of C tier. I watch a lot of Suchi, and Suchi is a Amir enthusiast, but honestly, watching him play her, like she's never seen particularly amazing. She has like, I think he's decided on like Metal Pierce being the best single target version of her, but even if you dupe Metal Pierce like 4 times, there's no real insane stacking going on, because obviously like she interacts with metallization, and unfortunately all of her quote-unquote good effects from metallization involve decreasing metallization. So if you do this 4 times, you might not even be able to get all the metallization effects off, right? Because you might just reduce too many metallizations, and then you just like lose and peter out on that. And then her AoE, Full Metal Hurricane, is not only expensive, but has the exact same problem where you need metallization. Although, to be fair, a lot of these do not require you to have, or a lot of these do not decrease metallization, to be fair, but this bottom right one, which is the highest version damage of it, it does reduce your metallization by a good amount. And again, if you dupe this 4 times, you might just run out of metallization and you lose the bonus from it. And again, maybe it's like, I don't play Amir, I only watch this guy play Amir, and he's done a lot of testing and stuff, but I personally don't see a version of Amir where if you, like a lot of the problems is with most characters is that most of the power comes from dupe stacking, and Amir not only has like, Amir does have good, like a really powerful card, like Iron Skin is objectively good because it lets you go fully immune for one turn. The issue is that it is an exhaust card, so if you dupe this 4 times, you're essentially relegating Amir into being like your immunity bot. And when the game is about like damage racing and like killing something as soon as possible, going damage immune is only really important for like people who are going for challenge runs, which isn't most players. So Amir unfortunately goes pretty low because she has very low damage, and or damage is okay, but it's very expensive and it's not super notable for that price, unfortunately. Maribell, I'm gonna put in the bottom of B tier only because, unlike Amir, Maribell does have meme potential, and that meme potential, as you might have noticed, like I referred to it a little bit when I talked about Orlea, but she has this thing where she does damage based on shield owned, and again, I haven't been able to test this out fully because I only noticed this recently, but there is a unique boss drop from I think it's Foretold Ruin, which allows you to retain shield per turn, Corrupted Core. And so the idea and the hope in the future, like if the next season like it's based in Corrupted Core or is based in Foretold Ruin, so you can get Corrupted Core, I'd be able to test this ideally. But essentially the idea is that you can stack up to like maybe like 5,000, 6,000 or more shield and then pump Shelter Strike. And then if you have the first epiphany or first dupe of Maribell, that means you're doing 50% more on that Shelter Strike. So if you have 6,000 HP, that means that Shelter Strike is doing 9,000 damage. And if you do 9,000, if you do the 9,000 damage, and because of the nature of this Shelter Strike, because it's targeted, it means it's affected by weakness, and it can crit. So obviously crit, depending on your crit damage, let's just be generous and say you have a 200% crit damage Amir or Maribell. That means your 9,000 damage Shelter Strike now does 18,000 damage. And if you're doing weakness, that means you get another 0.25% damage multiplier on it. So that means that 18,000% or your 18,000 damage Shelter Strike now does something like 22,000 damage, which is pretty good and pretty funny. So that's the sole reason why Maribell is in the bottom of B tier. She has the exact same problem as Amir, where like she has no cards that are worth duping a billion times. Obviously, there is the Shelter Strike strategy where you would get like 4 Shelter Strikes and then stack up to 5,000 HP and then pump all 4 Shelter Strikes in one turn and then delete the boss. But that falls into like the Orlea category where you're stacking and stacking and stacking over multiple turns in order to get one funny meme off. And not only like Orlea's version is not only easier to achieve, I mean, it's just easier to achieve, period, because Orlea herself comes with the engine in order to stack herself. Whereas with Maribell, if I'm playing it like that, unfortunately, Maribell has no actual strong shield generation. Her shelter attack, or whatever this is called, this gives you fixed shield, so that means you're not able to buff it with resolve or plus shield gen methods, and it's also capped out at 20% max HP, which is not that high. And then everything else doesn't really give you flat shield. Like we have Wolves Dome, which gives you resolve or counterattack, which is worthless for stacking shield. We have OIC, which does have shield, but there's nothing here that like gives you resolve, for example, nothing that gives you plus shield generation, which would be beneficial for this idea of stacking for a Giga Shelter Strike. It's all weakening counterattack, which is pretty useless. And you might look at this upgrade, OIC, with the 50% of shield to lowest enemy. The issue is this doesn't stack. I've tested it. This is locked out to 50%. Even though the game will tell you that you're scaling it from 50, 100, 150, 200, it will only ever do 50. So this is just bugged, unfortunately. And then this bottom right one with the fixed shield to number of own counterattack, this would have been okay if counterattack wasn't capped out to 10. Gaining 250% fixed shield is definitely very alright, but again, when I'm talking about numbers like 5,000, 6,000 shield, 250% fixed shield per turn is not that great. Maybe you can stack it, maybe you can get like, I don't even want to know if this works, but it's also unique, so you can't even stack if you want to, now that I'm looking at it properly. And yeah, basically like the entire issue is that unlike Orlea, Maribell doesn't come with her own damage scaling generation besides like her basic cards, and therefore it's a lot harder to pull it off. But the theory of it being there is already much better than what Amir has, which is why she goes up into the like bottom of B tier for me. Now Beryl is, depending on how you view her, either the top of A tier along with Renoa or the bottom of S tier. The thing that that Beryl does is that, as many players might know, you go opening found with the upgrade, you dupe this 3 or 4 times, and then you just start pumping out your heavy weapons. You keep your charge shot in your hand. You maybe play like Orlea or just like take neutral cards that have retain. And then with that, like if you have a hand of like 5 retain cards, you end turn, and then with 4 of these, you do 20 hits of 150% attack, and that is a lot. And all that is essentially technically free. And you can spend the rest of your deck and your time healing, shielding, buffing, and I'm pretty sure this is all affected by morale. So you can imagine like very much like Mei Lin, who's doing a lot of extra attacks, very much like Luke, who's doing a lot of extra attacks. If you were to play 4 opening founds and then get like 7 retain cards, you are doing 21 attack, or 7. It's 28 attacks, right? 28 pelts by Beryl every turn. And then with Guilty Pleasure, if you have the bottom middle Guilty Pleasure, the way it's worded, I haven't been able to lab Beryl out myself, but the way it's worded makes it sound like that you would once again do like activate opening found. So maybe that's not the case. Maybe you have to end turn in order to activate opening found. And even if this interaction doesn't work properly, like the case is still there. Like just like these other characters, you are doing a lot of damage at once. And I think I heard a rumor, or I saw people say that her opening founds are capped out by the damage hit count, which once again puts her into the territory of Luke, Mei Lin, where she is like the game had to be balanced around her having way too many hits, and that's the reason why she ends up here. So if you're trying to build Beryl, once again, you go opening found upgrade, you do it as many times as you can, you do any version of charge shot, you just don't cast it, and then you just hit the heavy weapon specialist card over and over and over again until you eventually just like have a hand mostly of retain cards, and then she just starts like slapping the crap out of the enemy with that. Selena, I think, also belongs in around B tier. She's, I don't know how bad she is, so she'll go in front of Maribell, but she's another character that I haven't been able to properly lab out. Unfortunately, Selena, I think in terms of power, she is like around where Haru is, because I've seen like people praise her. But again, because they haven't played her, that's why she's like next to Maribell. Selena is someone who is very honest with what she does, right? She has an upgrade that lets you attack like oh no, she has a, is it upgrade? No, it's a skill. So like high power scope with a skill, when you use it, she attacks with your allies attacks, which is like a crappier version of Hugo. And then she can do it again when you have I think it's this drone bombing upgrade. If you're either attacking with an attack weakness, which is pretty possible, like you align the character with the content so you can activate this drone bombing skill, or it's just like generically you're playing Mei Lin or something, you have this upgrade, she can have a lot of follow-up attacks. So she's essentially a super rare version of Hugo in that regard. And unfortunately, unlike Hugo, she's not like giga overpowered in that sense. She's just a little decent, and that's enough to like drop her a lot, because it is like high power scope being a skill and not an upgrade means that you do have to find it every turn, and if you draw it late, that means you miss out on a lot of the attacks from the your allies attacking. And then drone bombing being like very limited in scope, like you have to have the DPS attack and a weakness, or you have to have a passion attack character. Like these both just are very limited in comparison. And then unlike Hugo, her other 2 cards, target spotted does draw you one if you get the attunement version, but it's only a draw one, and you can't epiphany it. Like that's the epiphany, to draw one, right? So if you want to divine epiphany it to get another draw one, you're still spending 1 mana for that extra draw. So her draw power is not nearly as good as Hugo's. And tactical maneuver, very much like Khalipe, the card is just not that great, at least in my opinion. And obviously you can treat this retain card as like a pseudo upgrade, because this card will never go out of your hand, so therefore you never have to redraw it. But you'd rather just have a +1 advantage from like a draw 2 card for 0 mana than like a card that replaces itself, right? So that's why she's like very notably weaker than Hugo, and all of her weaknesses compared to Hugo are like very, very significant weaknesses. Like she has worse damage output, she has worse flexibility, she has worse draw, and all of that is enough to like drop her down by multiple tiers, because she's not giga pumping damage and her niche isn't powerful enough to really make her excel in current content. Luke, unsure as well. I've seen no one play him. Looking at his kit, I can't even imagine what he does, but I have no notes because he doesn't look good. Like very much like Owen, he probably belongs in bottom C tier because he doesn't look that great. But no one's been cooking, and I haven't really seen much theory on him, so I just don't want to bother giving a bad analysis of someone that I genuinely don't care about playing. Tressa goes into S tier. If you're any bit aware of Great Rift currently, you know exactly why Tressa is up here. She's Giga Broken with the upgrade card, Shadow Reload. She's a machine that turns all heal cards into absurd into absurd damage cards. And obviously with synergies with Cassius and Hugo, this kind of goes really, really crazy, really, really fast. So yeah, Shadow Reload's just a really broken card. And obviously against Great Rift, you do have some optimizations you need to make. Like Curse needs to be like particular cards like this, like for 2 turns when using attack cards, you have to keep either this or keep the base Epiphany. For Vital Attack, you do generically always want more agony damage or damage based on agony. Like there are certain optimizations to make, but she is so strong that you can just load in with only 3 or 4 Shadow Reloads, and every content in the game will just melt to her. Besides Great Rift, but Great Rift is only like that because it's technically immortal, so it's not even like a downside for her. So yeah, Tressa right now is not bounced against by Smilegate, but odds are very high that either she gets nerfed or they're gonna start adding like action count affixes on bosses to make her punished and to make her worse. So Tressa is basically the best character in the game by a very large margin when it comes to outside Chaos content. Within Chaos, she is actually ironically balanced for the most part because you do need to get good epiphanies and all that in order for her to pop off, and she is countered by characters that like punish you for action count, like blue pot monsters. But otherwise, like yeah, by far the best character. Mika, so obviously earlier, if you remember, I complained about Veronica not being that great, but Mika is going to be the first S tier support because Mika is a character that has the easiest access to AP. We all know Source of Water, and if you get Divine Epiphanies on Source of Water, you can get Draw along with AP, and if you get the Wave content, or like the Wind Recovering decrease cost by 1, like these just become massive AP positive sources. And just due to her character, like once again, if you're lazy like me, you're playing Mika Veronica, so odds are you'll get a good Mika deck. But unlike Veronica, like obviously once again, with the Lab Zero cards, you can get Portrait of Fury, and Portrait of Fury gives you a lot of draw, even on characters that don't have draw cards naturally. And then with that, Mika not only gives you insane AP so that you can play everything you want to play, she also gives you decent draw if you hit the forbidden cards, and she keeps you alive permanently in almost all content that doesn't outright one-shot you. So she is very powerful. She is, with like, if you get like this Source of Water and you heal, she represents like +8 AP with 4 dupes, which is an absurd amount. And with this middle or top right or top middle one, she represents 4 AP with a lot of heal, which is still a lot. So almost no matter how you treat her, she is just a very like she's incredibly AP positive, and she even comes with the benefit of if you're not abusing her in Great Rift, you can make her deck smaller with upgrade, and then Blessing of Waves can sometimes be like a neutral card with this one wave. Obviously, it's not true neutral because wave, you'd rather that wave just give you the real 1 AP instead of using Blessing of Waves to refund itself. But point is there is that like if you get the correct Divine Epiphany, she draws her entire deck herself, and then with Portrait of Fury, she gives you card positive mechanics. So she's just really strong. And again, Veronica draws more powerfully, but Mika giving you 4 to 8 AP depending on your Epiphany on Source of Water is very undeniably powerful. Now Ray is gonna go into the A tier of this tier list because she is like I think she's a little worse than Veronica because she doesn't have as nearly as powerful draw power, but her efficiency is less in her raw draw power, and it's more in the fact that she has very, very strong buffs for the game and characters. So obviously, Ray has Predator Blade, which is +4 morale. She has Dark Condensation, which lets you target a single card or attack card by 150%, which is basically 7.5 morale. She has Resonating Darkness, which if you're tuning the deck to them or to the character, she gets anywhere from like +40 to +60% damage. So between 150% buff, 4 morale, that's maybe 230, plus let's just lowball this, right? Plus another 40, you're getting +290% damage. And then if you have Strike of Darkness, well, this doesn't really count because it's a basic attack cards, right? So like if you look at the Chizuru version, for example, with this Strike of Darkness and with Predator's Blade, you're getting like Chizuru is unfortunately like her base attack gets downgraded 6%, so you're getting +90 and +80. So each Chizuru basic attack card will be getting +170% times 2, which basically triples or quadruples, I think, the damage amount baseline for Chizuru, which is really obviously absurd for a character like that. And then if you're going for the other Chizuru aspect, which is like stacking up Shadow Moon Plus all the way, that's when you're getting the +290% across 10 hits between Resonating Darkness, Condensation, and Predator Blade. Unfortunately, dupes on Ray are basically useless. The only buff that stacks quote unquote properly, which is aka like it actually stacks on the card within that usage, that one usage, is gonna be the upgrade version of Dark Condensation. Unfortunately, these versions of Dark Condensations, these are, or like this version, this bottom middle version, it does not stack. As far as I'm aware, this version up here also does not stack. It just extends the turn count or extends the charge count. Same thing with Strike of Darkness. If you're trying to go for like a funny basic attack build, I've tested it, I confirmed it. The damage increase to basic attack cards is also by the turn, not by, like, it's by the turn. So if you use this 3 times, you get this buff for 3 turns, but you're not getting 450% more damage on the basic attack cards. So unfortunately, like, she cannot be really memed that well. Again, you could go for the 4 copy of Dark Condensation and get plus 200% damage amount, but it's like really unwieldy to do that because that means you have to draw, like, you have to draw the attack card and then draw all 4 copies of this Dark Condensation and then have the mana left over to pump all these Dark Condensations into that one card. And then that card's gonna be quite good. Like plus 200% flat is gonna be quite good, but that card cannot be a generated card. It cannot be it can be a generated card, and it can be a card that replaces itself. So, for example, with Chizuru, with Shadow of the Moon Plus, that tech is useless because your next Shadow of the Moon Plus will forget the fact that you buffed Shadow of the Moon Plus with Dark Condensation. So there aren't many other cards in the game that are a spammable 10 hit like Chizuru's Shadow of the Moon Plus with Tsukuyomi upgrade. So that's why Rei ends up being a bit low. Her one turn effect is very, very powerful, and if you're able to cycle really, really hard and get, Predator Blade, Dark Condensation back over and over and over again, her value is very much like, it cannot be understated, but compared to the other 2 support characters, which are gonna be the last 2 characters I cover, they are it's just like these characters don't only draw way more consistently than Rei, they also not necessarily like fully compete with the damage amp, but they are approaching her damage amp like as like a side bonus. So next character, Cassius, S tier. Let me move these characters over because these are the right size of the characters I'm not sure about, right? So that's why they're all over here. Yeah. Cassius is going to be like a super broken support. We've all seen the Great Rift shenanigans, and the more people play with him, the more we are knowing that having morale stack up with the quest mechanic is really obscene. Cassius, you do have to get him high on potential, but besides that, you can see here, can you see it on stream? You can. I probably should have checked this earlier. But you see this potential down here. It's going to be on quest completion, gain 1 morale for 1 turn. And then his quests are all very simple to achieve. We can see the quest cards themselves on the quest conditions because the site is a bit limited. But basically, 000 is casting 3 0 cost, 111 is casting 3 1 cost, Straight is casting a 0, 1, and 2 cost, and then Full House is each character using a card. 000 and Full House are the really only 2 quest cards that are truly obscenely strong. Full House obviously is really powerful because you can draw a lot of extra cards with Full House. Like you can draw like up to like 7 more times per turn for essentially free with Full House if you properly manage your hand and your hand management and play order. Whereas with 000, I mean obviously Tressa exists. Chizuru can exist with Divine Epiphanies. There's all characters that have like Giga, like with Luke, obviously that interaction. There's all characters that have absurdly obscene interactions with 0 costs. And so 000 just keeps pumping it out. And you can see 000 stacks more damage with the more attack cards you use. And so very often these 0 costs you're abusing to get multiple 000 stacks will just make 000 stronger and stronger and stronger. So if you've seen Great Rift gameplay, you're probably very aware that like the capping out, like at the very end of all the infinite amounts of Trusted Shadow Daggers, all the other 000s, all the 111s you generate randomly, 000 will very often hit like 4,500 damage per 000 cast, and then usually your hand is full then by the end. So you're dealing like 7 000s, which is like 4,500, 4,450, 4,580, like etc. On and on and on for like the last finisher, and that's like literally like 36,000 damage at the very end after you've spammed the boss with like all those Shadow Daggers and all those other 000s, right? So it's like really, really broken. And then even without that, again, obviously with Full House, like even ignoring the 000 stacking, Full House gives you so much draw. And Cassius himself gives you a ton of draw. Pop by Popper obviously gives you the quest line to get 000 or Full House. Double Dice has an Epiphany that gives you 1 draw for free, or lets you cycle your deck very aggressively with draw 2, discard 2. You have Shuffle, which is one of the most powerful draw cards in the game. You have the version where you discard everything, where you can choose discard most stuff, where you can discard everything and then draw 5, where you can like just cycle your deck for fun, which this one I took for Renoa, which was okay for Renoa. Dice Trick, obviously with the upgrade, you can generate even more quest cards, which is either more damage with 000 or more draw with Full House, or getting straight, which is the most expensive version of the quest cards, for free, which is 2 morale and 2 fortitude, which is insane. And then Joker being like a targeted tutor, which allows you to draw like your extra draw cards or your extra AP cards, like all like, or even target the attack card you're missing. Like Cassius' entire kit is really powerful, and generically he is very strong, especially if you're able to play around full house properly. And this will double up with the next card we're talking about, but you have to remember that once again, there is a card called, or an equip called Dimensional Cube, where when you discard, you get plus 10% damage for 1 turn. As I mentioned earlier with Cassius, when you play, like let's say that you're not abusing the 000 spam with with for Great Rift, and that will actually free you up with Dice Trick, right? Like you don't need to get infinite Dice Tricks if you're not doing like long-term content. If you're trying to do a one-shot, what you can do is you can go for a dupe, or you can like end up duping Shuffle. You can go this version of Shuffle, the bottom left version, where you discard all of your hands, or you move all. Oh no, sorry, this isn't even discard. Oh right, they nerfed this, right? So this didn't work. But instead you can do the like the top versions of Shuffle, where you discard all hands, or you can discard any amount of cards in hand. This allows you to recycle a lot of free discards, and then with Dice of Discord, let's say you discard 5 cards, and you have 4 of these, and you just like recycle those 5 cards over and over again. That's plus 200% damage from Dice of Discord, and that is essentially 10 morale, and that's not including all the full houses you might have procced earlier. So Cassius can get you like plus 15 morale very easily, which is 300% damage. And as you might realize from that number, that is very competitive, if not exceeding the amount of damage that Ray can give you while drawing you cards, while giving you other draw effects. Like if you have 1 Dice Trick to give you straight, if you have like more cards you need to draw, like that is just how powerful Cassius is. And the best part is that it's significant. It's like very, very cheap to do all that, because just like Ray costs 1 mana and Shuffle costs 1 mana for all the things you're gonna be doing. And like you can also Divine Epiphany this to being free, right? Like there's way more ways for Cassius to go off the deep end with these cards than it is for Ray, and that's why he ends up being like a tier higher, because he not only provides damage buffs, like as I mentioned, he also provides really strong cycling, which is way more important in my opinion. And then Nia is also going to be an S tier. Nia in S tier is more of the fact that we have Eternal Hunger in the game. Eternal Hunger is basically the sole reason why Nia is even playable right now. Once this cycles out, like if it's more difficult to find Eternal Hunger, then Nia will be much harder to grind and farm. But you can see that attunement, draw 1 plus 1 AP. Nia has Adagio, and Adagio, if you don't know, is a card that allows you to cycle and put cards back on top of your deck. And as you might imagine, if you have any form of draw that lets you draw again, you can cycle Eternal Hunger like up to as many Adagio copies that you have. So Eternal Hunger goes from being like a +1 AP for the entire battle to being +4 AP per turn, depending on how many Adagios you have. So the only 2 or the 3 Adagios that let you do that are going to be the Base Epiphany, the one that gives you draw 2, discard 2, and then the one that lets you that generates the Base Epiphany after you cast it if you discard once. All the other Adagios unfortunately do not generate, or like do not interact with Eternal Hunger properly, but just these 3 Adagios, if you dupe this like a notable amount of times, will give you superpower with Eternal Hunger. And this doesn't even include the fact that Adagio itself can go +1 AP. So if you cast, like let's just say that for the sake of save data file shenanigans, you only get 3 Divine Epiphanies for Adagio with +1 AP. That means with any of these, your Eternal Hunger will give you another +3 AP, and so you're not only getting significantly more draw, because Eternal Hunger also draws you cards, you're also getting the AP as well. So you go from getting +3 AP from Eternal Hunger cycling to +6 overall, and +6 is extremely competitive with Mika. And then obviously with the discard effect of Adagio, once again, we refer back to Divine Dice, or Dimensional Cube, whatever it's called. Dimensional Cube, which will once again give you a lot of damage for free with Nia. And then another upside for Nia with Dimensional Cube is that she has her ego skill discards your entire deck. So if you have like a 20 card deck, that means it's another plus 200% for Dimensional Cube. And that's not even noting the fact that like Mute Accent, which is kind of bad to be fair, gives you more discard. You have stuff like Soul Rip benefiting from discard, which again is not that great. G Chord also lets you, like if you have cards that are kind of expensive, G Chord lets you cheat out that card for a little more cheap price. Like if you're playing like if you're playing Nia Mika, for example, and you have a whirlpool that you need to get rid of, then you can cycle out that whirlpool with the draw 2, discard 2. You can cheat the Eternal Hunger back out with Confiscation, and then forcibly play or discard the whirlpool for free, or not for free, for 1 mana with G-Cord, which saves you 1 mana overall, which obviously can be very helpful if you're playing like scuffed builds here and there. But basically, Nia with Dimensional Cube with Eternal Hunger is essentially like the unholy amalgamation of Cassius and Mika all in one. And the best part is that Cassius Nia is a really powerful duo partner, because they not only turbocharge Dimensional Cube even more, they also kind of bounce off each other, because if you get the Adagio Epiphany that generates another Adagio, obviously that is more full house or even 000 power. And that way, like, you're utilizing Cassius and Nia together to power off each other, because with that you can draw into full house more often, you can draw into your damage characters cards more often, you can get more morale, you have more charges for morale because of Adagio. All this stuff just makes them a really powerful dual engine, and if you get the really strong builds for both of them, you essentially guarantee that you can draw your entire deck every turn while still having extremely high damage count because of the morale from Cassius, as well as the combined discards from them to pump up Dimensional Cube, which essentially makes Rei like a lot weaker in a sense, because she isn't getting near as much draw and her damage is being outpaced by all those effects. But with all that said, this video is obviously going very long, but just very briefly, like, this is my review of all the tiers on this. I'll probably make another tier. Like, I need to make more content anyways for the rest of the week, so I might just like have a much shorter version of this video, for like what I just said here, but instead like reviewing the divine requirements. But basically, like Mika, as I mentioned, you need Divine Epiphany on Source of Water to draw in order to make her cycle. Chizuru, unfortunately, Starmie's version of Chizuru requires like draw 1 on Tsukuyomi in order to get enough draw power to cycle the deck, and my version of the basic attack cards. I think you maybe don't need that for basic attack because you have Nia to fix everything. But for the most part, like, if you're going what I want to play, or you want like a more reliable version, you do need 0 cost on Oni Hunt, which is very difficult to get. Orlea, for like her truly obscene things, does need divines. Otherwise, if you're going Swifty, she can drop down here, but Swifty is not good. And then Luke obviously really requires divines for the Demon Dance pop-off dreams to even be doable. All these characters, divines are extremely nice, but you really don't need them. Mei Lin obviously can do her entire thing with just draw power. Yuki would like divines, but you don't need them. Veronica, even with just base Epiphany, repos, and Kowalski's, will still draw your entire deck. Nia with Eternal Hunger, doesn't matter. Tressa just needs the dupes. Renoa doesn't really care. Haru is a character that like you might think she needs it, but because specifically of cards like Protein, the current accessory in Lab Zero that discounts cards, assuming you're outside Chaos, you can just reset your runs until Protein discounts specifically Anchor Shot, and then that will actually be permanent for the entire first stage. So if you're going for highlight memes like for what I'm doing, then you don't even need to get the Divine Epiphany on Anchor Shot in order to do infinite combos with Anchor Shot or pseudo infinite combos with Anchor Shot. You just need to hit the Protein on it, and then that completely removes the need to chase Divine. So that's why she's here. Same thing for Rin. Obviously you would like to get Divine Epiphany on her Dark Mist Annihilation, but if you have Protein, if you have like repos, if you have other things that can reduce it, she can live without it. Khalipe, I think you want Divine, like you want +1 AP, maybe +1 draw on Vulture Projection, and she's better, but she doesn't need it. And then obviously with like this guy, like Beryl, you don't need it. Kayron, I don't think you need it. Amir, should have been down here, my bad, because I don't even know what Amir needs. Cassius for the Gigabist needs it, but you can honestly play Cassius with no dupes at all because he's that powerful. Maribell, as we discussed earlier, only really needs like good Epiphanies for the most part, and you could dupe Shelter Strike, but that's like chase. That's like whatever that one term is, like where you chase the completion before you see the route for it. Hugo again obviously needs the dupes to be super powerful, but he doesn't really need them to be efficient. And same thing here. And then Rei. Rei's dupes are really whatever. Like, there is snack time, don't get me wrong, but snack time with the excessive amount of draw power that you could play from the other support is not really that important. It'll obviously guarantee that you draw your full combo more easily on the first turn, and you can probably keep those snack times as well for next turns, but it's not that important in my opinion. And Owen, same thing. So yeah, that'll be a video. A very long yap fest. Hopefully my throat can survive the rest of the tier list videos I need to make this today, but we'll see. Thanks for watching, guys. Have a good day or night wherever you are, and I hope the next phase of Season 1 treats you well, because I won't be around to play most of it.